now.
So a
There we
big
go.
welcome to everyone watching our recording. As I said, we're going to be going through from the initial stages of approach all the way through to what happens during an edit and then into aftercare. So we're going to start out with talking about what does our initial interaction with a client look like. So Claire, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, these days, most of my clients approach me by email, but not always, but most of the time it is by email. Occasionally, it's by the more informal method of Facebook Messenger or LinkedIn, direct messages on LinkedIn or whatever platform I happen to be on. And by the way, I mean, I'm fine with that. Like, that might be something where different editors have different opinions on that. Some will only want approaches via email and won't want people to slide into the DMs. But the way that I am sort of in writing communities and so on, it just feels like a natural next step that sometimes people just bob me a direct message, and that's absolutely fine. But for a more sort of formal approach, and actually there are advantages of the more formal approach, the initial interaction from a client is that they have filled in my contact form on my website. And why that's quite useful is it gets those initial questions out of the way, which might just take a few emails or messages back and forth to establish, like, what is it you want? That sounds rude. What do you want? What do you want from me? What is it you want, and when are you wanting it? And those kind of, what genre are you writing? A few of those bits. So I think there's four questions maximum, that they fill in, and it comes to me, and then our initial interaction starts from that point. I review what they've written, and I get back in touch, and then we start talking, and we start talking about whether it's doable, whether I'm the right person to do what it is they're hoping for, and then we sort of hash it out from that point. How about you, Vicky?
Yeah, I'm similar. A lot of interaction comes from emails and from contact on the website, especially if I've had a client kind of passed on through word of mouth. They usually come to me via email. Again,
Hmm.
more than happy for any approaches on social media. I used to be very big on Twitter/X, but it has become it's become untenable to be there. So we
Okay.
get fewer DMs over there now. But yeah, similarly, the I find that the opening interactions quite often tend to be from authors being quite uncertain about what they want and kind of saying, "Oh, I know I need to get an editor. I'm not really sure what I'm looking for," and I usually use that as a jumping off point to say, "Okay, well, this is what I can provide. This is how I think that I could help you. These are the different services that I offer. Does that sound like something that would interest you? If it does." Drop me over a sample and I can show you how I work and you can have a look at how I work and I can at the same time assess your manuscript to kind of get a good idea of what I'm dealing with and what I think maybe you need help with. So yeah, a lot of my clients when they first come to me, I don't know if you get this as well, are very uncertain about what they're actually looking for. Um,
Yeah, well, I was about to say sometimes it's the vocabulary of,
yeah,
well, what am I calling this thing? So sometimes the word proofreading is used,
yep,
and actually, when it comes down to it, it isn't really a proofread that they're after. But it's fine for especially newbie writers to not know all the terminology in this
yeah,
editing world of ours. I mean, we don't exactly help matters because we're not necessarily consistent between, one editor might call something a line edit that the other editor calls a copy edit.
yeah.
And proofread is just like a general word in wider vocabulary, isn't it? That people use for, please
Please
can you
find my typos.
well, yeah, please can you check my thing? So proofreading equals checking of
Mm.
whatever it is. But then there's checking and then there's checking. So I don't know if I'm veering into another question here, Vicky, but I would just say that, a proofread in industry sort of talk is the very, very, very last stage, which is, dotting the I's and crossing the T's. In fact, proofreaders will really sit on their hands and will try and do as little as they can because it should be done on a PDF on a typeset
Mm.
document. So at that
I was
point
going to
in
say
yeah,
it's as much about formatting at that point
yeah, it
as it is
is.
about finding the nitty-gritty of the language and the words and and
Exactly.
all of
If
that.
yeah, if it reads as good enough at that proofreading stage, then it stays as it is because it's already been typeset, so you don't want to be fiddling with it too much
Mm.
and potentially introducing any new errors. So so yeah, proof actually to be honest with you, I don't do many proofreads anymore.
I haven't
Like
got the software to do it.
no, right. So I don't do it very often. And actually, when it comes to it, when I get into these conversations, I think there's been once in the last 12 months where somebody actually wanted
Mm.
that service of look at my typeset document, you know. But other than that, it's an edit. So then we talk about the different edits, line and copy edit. We talk about sometimes use a term proof edit and the rest of it. So
Mm.
so yeah, it's about vocabulary sometimes, you know, what is it you're actually after? And what am I calling it? What is it you'll get? You
Yeah,
know?
definitely.
Yeah.
So I mentioned a sample edit, which is something
Mm.
that I ask for very early on in the process. Once I've established that I can actually help you,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the next point is, okay, can I have a look at your work? Can I show you how I work? For you, what is the point of asking for a sample edit? Do you ask everyone for a sample edit?
Yes, every edit, yeah, everything that's going to end up in an edit, yes. The reason I'm being a little bit is because I don't when it's a manuscript assessment, but a
Yeah.
manuscript assessment is not an edit. So everything that's called an edit, yes, I ask for a sample, and I ask for 1,000 words from somewhere in the middle of the manuscript. I never want the opening 1,000 words. Thank you very much.
And for
Uh,
me as well, I
yeah.
ask for something from the middle, and that also includes dialogue.
Yes. What
Yeah.
I learned that the hard way when ages ago now, where I did a sample where there wasn't any dialogue in there, and I thought, well, this is a very clean manuscript. This doesn't need, and then it was like, oh, actually, well, it's quite a lot to do with the dialogue.
And it's one of those things
Yeah,
where it appears so frequently and everywhere else that if it is something that you have to fix, it's really time
it is
consuming.
time
You
consuming.
can't do a find and replace on dialogue punctuation.
No, no, there's too many variations. But I mean, I just sort of sucked that up. It wasn't the author's fault that I'd
Yeah.
asked for a sample from, so, but I did learn that lesson, like ask for something that includes dialogue and description, because some writers can handle one better than the other, and you need to see how they handle both.
Yeah. And I
Yeah,
think this is part of the importance of the sample edit for me is every author has strengths and weaknesses,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
be it with spelling, punctuation, grammar, be it with constructing a story, be it with introducing characters, all of these various elements that we expect an author to be able to deal with. And a sample edit just gives you a really, really good, clear idea of, okay, these are the kinds of areas that are going to need a little bit of work. These are the kinds of areas that are going to be just like a quick fix.
hmm
So when I ask for a sample edit, I'll usually ask for about 5 to 6 pages. And I use that. I'll mark it up the way that I would for any other edit, so clients can see the way that I deliver comments, because that's going to be another big difference between different editors is how is feedback delivered.
yeah, yeah,
And it can be really useful for you to know what kind of feedback is helpful to you. If you can communicate that to an editor, that's amazing.
hmm
But that I've seen editors online, there's a group that call themselves the butchers, who
Oh
are,
no, don't like the
yeah,
sound of
they are
those.
like, we will
Hmm
cut up your manuscript and we will rip it to pieces and we
Oh
will make it
no.
amazing. That's not me.
It,
Um,
yeah, no, I don't like that terminology.
No, some people will love it though, because I mean, obviously they must have clients
Oh,
who
well,
are like,
true.
just give it to me hard. That no, I am practical and efficient and kind of to the point, but definitely compliment sandwich. So yeah, it gives you an idea of how your editor is going to communicate with you within the manuscript, which, especially from a developmental point of view, is super important, because there are going to be comments about story and character and pacing, which are maybe a little bit harder to take than someone just saying, "Look, your grammar's not great here." Um, So yeah, it's kind of for me a two-way street so that I can assess a manuscript and see, okay, I think these are going to be problems. So this is going to take me about this long to try and fix or to get through. But it's also a really, really important tool for you as an author
Yeah.
to understand who you're working with and how they work.
I really wouldn't like I honestly would not want them to work with me until they've heard from me
Yeah,
and heard my voice because I'm absolutely fine with not being the editor for everybody.
yeah.
You know, I want people to get the right editor because that's going to be a painful process if you don't take to the way that,
Mm,
feedback's delivered or the types of interventions that I make as an editor. So, um, some editors charge for a sample. Um, that's fine. I don't, but
I charge so if I'll do my initial few pages and I
right.
say if you want a longer sample, I
Oh,
charge
fair enough.
£10 for a 5,000 word
Oh, right.
edit.
Well,
So
that's
give
very
yeah.
reasonable. Yeah, yeah. No, and I'm like, I understand because it does take quite a, it's if I'm doing a sample, it's not as quick as doing 1,000 words
Mm,
when you're into an edit, So it might take me a morning. So it takes a little while. It takes a bit of thinking about, but I still wouldn't want to go any further with that writer until I've done that because it's so important and you can iron out any issues at that stage,
mm.
So I always say in the handover for the sample. Um, if you want to work together, but there's something that you'd want to tweak, just let me know. If there's if so and it does happen. So I've had writers recently who've said like I found I provide a few different documents, and one of them is the one with the track changes, and then there's various things. It's like I don't really want that document. I don't like the document. I don't like all the red. It's really bothering me. I'll have the one with the comments on it, but I don't like that one because it's just not for me. So it's those kind of things. It helps the logistics as well. So
Mm.
yeah, samples are super important for me, and I'll always make time for them.
And I think maybe that brings us on quite well to our question about what are any red flags to watch out for when selecting an editor, because I would say someone who kind of just gives you a blanket price and says, I will do it for that much without looking at your work, without giving you any idea of how they're going to deliver their feedback, that for me would be a big red flag.
Yeah, because how do they know? At the end of the day, how do they know? Because I don't know about you, Vicky, but on my website, I give people a range. I'll say, my copy editing fees between this much and this much, and I do it per 1,000 words. I don't do it
Yeah.
hourly. I do it per 1,000 words. But I don't know until I've done a sample, like where to place that
Mm.
quote. So editors, red flag editors, yes, somebody who is just has got a fixed price, hasn't checked what they're getting off you, etc. Yeah, that would be a red flag, I think, if they were a bit funny
Yeah.
about that.
I'm trying to think what else would be a red flag for me. I think probably someone who doesn't ask very many questions beforehand.
Right.
Someone who doesn't provide a style guide as part of the service.
Well, that depends on where you're at in the service.
Yeah, I guess so.
But even if they don't provide a style guide, they might, as long as they ask those sorts of questions,
Mm,
like they could do with knowing from you as a writer, they could do, are we British English? Are we American
yeah.
English? That kind of thing. What are we, are you a fan of an Oxford comma? And it's sometimes no, you can work it out by seeing what the writer is kind of doing,
Yeah.
but certain questions that you might want to just because otherwise, if you don't talk to writers about style, then the style that's going to be used is it might be the editors, and what it
Mm,
needs to be is the writer's style. And so obviously you can go on the words that are in front of you and work out by majority choices. I want to do this, curly quotation, doubles, Oxford commas, want to do this, that, and the other. But if there's no dialogue about any of that, I suppose.
yeah, this is where you have your contact sheet where you ask a bunch of questions. Before I start an edit, I have a front sheet that I ask an author to fill out, which has kind of, am I doing American or British English? Where is it set? Is it set in a fantastical place? Is it set
Right.
somewhere in the UK? Because that obviously helps with checking consistency with stuff.
Yeah.
What else do I ask? I don't think I ask about the Oxford comma. It's usually quite easy just to see what they're
Yeah, yeah,
doing.
yeah. Well, that's it. That's it.
And
Yeah,
content warnings I ask for as well, just because it's a useful thing to know about.
fair enough.
Um,
Fair enough. If we go back to the red flag thing, I really wanted to mention as well perfection. The word perfection, I would say, is a red flag. So if an editor is guaranteeing there'll be zero anything wrong, anything, I mean, obviously we do our very, 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 very
we're only
best.
human.
Yeah, we do our very, very best. But you think about all the traditionally published novels
Mm,
that people find the odd thing in. And I mean, like, honestly, I think that my accuracy is pretty good because I use the read aloud function and that really throws things my way that. So I'm not going to say I'm bad at this or anything, but I just think if you see the word perfection from an editor in their marketing materials, like just have a think and think. Is that too good to be true?
mm. Do we want to talk about using AI?
I don't know, do we?
Maybe we'll come to it later because we're going to
No, we
talk
can
about
do. No,
using
we can
tools.
do. No, it's all right. It's obviously in this world. So yeah,
Yeah,
go
it's
on,
a hot
go for it. It
topic.
is a hot topic. I'm like,
So
yeah,
yeah,
go on, go for it. I'll stop being a wimp. Yes.
so I am AI agnostic, which is a dangerous thing to say in the writing
Oh,
community. My husband works very closely in programming with AI, so
okay.
we are delighted because it's taking over the bits of his job that he doesn't like. Um,
Right.
but in terms of writing, if an editor is kind of, I heard someone say that using Grammarly is a red flag, and I'm not sure about that because, to be honest, a red underline is always helpful.
Are you talking
Um,
writer or editor? A writer using Grammarly or an
no, an
editor using?
editor,
Oh, right.
yeah, but I would not trust an editor who is relying entirely on AI to help them do their job.
No, no,
No,
because it's wrong so often.
yeah,
I think I, I think that where yeah, it's being AI agnostic is a good term, really, Vicky, because it's where we are at the moment.
yeah.
And I don't really want. It's so tribal. It's so tribal. I
Mm.
like you can see I'm like flapping about in this
We're so
topic.
scared about
I'm so,
even talking about it.
but some editors aren't. So actually, if as a
Mm.
writer you've got a really strong opinion, one way or another, there's loads of editors about finding the right editor for you. There's some very vocal editors who will vocally tell you one way or another which camp they're in.
Mm.
Now, I'm not using it for my editing.
No.
Would I take writing that has seen any of, seen Chat GPT? I'd, I'd, it depends what it's been used for. A bit of
Yeah.
brainstorming, like back and forth idea generation. But I don't want to work on something that's entirely AI. No,
Yeah.
thank you very, like really, I don't. Um, but I'm not going to kick away everybody that's had a conversation with ChatGPT about how to write the best fight scenes.
Yeah, I think I would just say educate yourself about how these AIs are being trained at the moment, because that's the thing that bothers me is
Yeah.
um the dodginess of using copyrighted material. But that is a
Yeah, I
topic for
know.
another day.
It is possibly a topic for another day, but yeah, I like that, Vicky, and I'm gonna nick
AI
AI
agnostic.
agnostic as my stance at the moment, and that's as vocal as you'll hear me be about it, actually, because I'm a little bit like of a wimp and I hate conflict,
So
apart from in stories.
maybe this brings us really nicely to what can a writer do to prepare their work for editing? Because there might be some
Yes.
writers out there who think, oh God, I have to put it through something like ChatGPT to make sure that it's grammatically as clean as possible.
Mm,
I no, that's not true.
no. But I mean, I don't know where this places me on the AI spectrum, but I have no problem with Grammarly or Pro Writing Aid as a writer using it
Mm,
for cleaning up what they're doing and spotting things like their echoes and so on. Because I do right, okay, I do draw a distinction between the AI that's checking things like that and the
mm,
generative, you know.
yeah,
Generative not so keen on, but those kind of like, oh, it's told you that you've used the wrong kind of there. Like, crack on, that's absolutely fine because then when it comes to me, it's cleaner and therefore I can focus on the things that AI doesn't know how to do or actually doesn't have the nuance for because that's the thing at the minute. is the lack of nuance. And the with generative AI, everything's coming out as really cliched because that's the thing. It's like what in the majority of cases, what are writers doing in these fight scenes, in the majority in these romance scenes, in the blah blah blah. How do you write those kind of sentences? It's coming out as really cliched, which is going to be a really unsatisfying read at the
Mm.
end of the day. Um, but in terms of looking at your commas and that's fine, crack on, in my view.
Yeah, in terms of preparing work for editing, I know I've had authors approach me who have said that they're very nervous about getting edited because they feel like they're not perfect enough. And I would say that's why you're coming to an editor. Like, it's so interesting. I find when authors are having like full-on battles about the serial comma, and they'll turn to me as an editor and say, "Oh, you must have a side. This must make you really angry." And like, if I had a strong side and the Oxford comma made me angry all of the time, I would not be able to edit. The whole point of our job is that we sometimes take something that's quite rough, sometimes take something that's very polished, and
Yeah,
we improve on it. So please don't ever feel afraid to approach an editor because of the quality of your manuscript, because I guarantee we will have seen worse at some point. And
I,
we are here to help. That's the point of what we do.
yeah. I worked with an American writer who's quite severely dyslexic, actually, and a few editors had, I don't know, sent her away at the sample stage, just being a little bit overwhelmed by what they were facing. But whether it's my background in education or I don't know, but it was readable to me. I understood what she was trying to say. It was absolutely fine. So no problem with that. Um, I do find that some writers get like they mention school to me, and I don't mention school to them. They mention school to me, so they might say, "Oh, I wasn't taught this at school," or I was taught this. That's one thing. Like I was taught this, so I've been doing this, and I've changed something that they were actually taught was correct at school and so on. But it isn't school. Editing isn't your English teacher marking it. You're not going to get a grade on it. You don't need to worry about it. I think the difference is that we're all in it together. So
Mm,
there's no kind of like judgment call at the end of it. We're all in it together. So just be open. Don't be nervous about it because you'll get a better piece of writing out at the end. If you can be open and to the changes, you'll have a better piece of writing at the end of it. So don't
I would
worry about hang-ups of that nature if
I
you
would
can.
echo so much your idea of we're on the same team now. And I think that's
Yeah,
something that if you're approaching an editor, something to look for is like my authors are now my authors and I
yeah,
am their cheerleader.
yeah.
And we are part of the same team. So even though it might appear that an editor is someone who is quite critical or who is challenging you on certain things, like the reason that we're doing it is to it's either to make a better story or to get you to think from a developmental point of view about why you've made that decision or to explain yourself better or that kind of thing. So that I think it can take a bit of a switch of mindset sometimes for authors who are working with an editor for the first time.
Mm,
But we are absolutely your champions and we want you to succeed very
yeah,
much.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I think this also brings us to a question that we had in from an author in the run up. I don't know if you want to give their name, who was asking about how can an editor help me level up my writing?
Oh, that was Marie. Yeah, it was essentially what
Thank you,
Marie,
Marie.
yeah, Marie was asking that. Yeah, oops.
Yeah. So one thing that I would say is, like Claire said, if you put your work into ChatGPT and you say, can you make sure that I'm using there and there and there, right? The three different kinds, it will correct your work and you will come out with a lovely manuscript. If you ask me for a manuscript evaluation, for example, or if I'm editing and you notice that that's something that I'm changing a lot and you want to ask why, we will explain to you what the rules are. Like I said, with punctuating dialogue is something that so many of my clients who are amazing writers and very skilled writers, technical writers in other respects, and they've just struggled with this thing for so long. And you're able to go through with them, okay, this is what the rules are. This is why I'm changing these things. And you have someone who can kind of talk to you face to face and say, okay, do you understand now? So you, again, you have a person who you can ask, how does this work? And unlike maybe ChatGPT, where you put in a thing and it tells you something one way, I know that there will be people who learn a lot better from having something explained to them, from being given practical examples, to whom you can say, I still don't quite understand. Can you say the same thing, but in slightly different words in a way that
Yeah.
can really help?
I think for that dialogue example,
Mm,
I think that it's when it's interrupted dialogue, for example, where people trip up. You know, somebody starts saying something, there's something in the middle, and then they continue saying it. And I can't remember which program it is. It was something I used years ago, but it was, you've had somebody said a question. They've said, "Where is it?" Question mark, close speech mark. She said, right? And one of them, and I don't know if it was Word or Grammarly or something,
something said to
as
put a capital.
capital S, because the question mark. So it's read that question mark. It thinks, oh, a question mark, basically a full stop with a above it, therefore we treat it as the end of a sentence. Well,
Mm,
no, the sentence has not finished yet until you've got to the end of, she said blah blah blah, full stop. So it doesn't always know, and so yeah, that's the kind of thing that we can help writers with. But that's just, I think that what I would say is that for leveling up the writing, yes, happy to explain any punctuation rules, especially I've had people say, I've never really got gist of dashes. I've never really got the gist of colons and semicolons. That's the kind of thing that if they're asking me about that. But moreover, it's to do with things like I've made an edit, which I've at a line editing level, which is a sort of showing versus telling edit, would be a good example. So I've taken out some emotion word that was there, happy, angry, scared, frightened, whatever. And I've said in the comments, um, the reader can inference, like they can tell that that feeling is there. That feeling does not need to be named or labeled. So this is a showing versus telling edit, and so they have therefore come away and learned, well, that's the kind of thing that showing versus telling means, and that I
mm,
can know about um for next time. And another one, sorry, I'm waxing lyrical, Vicky. Another another one would be to do with point of view glitches. So,
mm,
I've had feedback from writers that they've learned a lot about point of view from having an edit. So it's things, and this is a line editing, copy editing level. It's not developmental stuff. So it's just the odd tweak here and there. So it might be, for example, where a character, like say there's, for instance, the commander or something, or the sergeant, or the whoever, and it's like, are you referring to them as the commander, or are you referring them to by Sarah or mother or somebody who's got more than one role? They are a commander, a mother, and their name is also Sarah. And sometimes like what they're called in the narrative, well, obviously it's a reflection of the narrative voice and the point of view. So it's those kinds of little switches, like how whose whose view are we in? Are we looking from the inside out? Are we looking from over here? So I use
and how
terms
and
like
how do
on,
they know this information is a big one
yeah,
for me.
exactly, yeah. So
You know, you the author know. How do they know?
yeah. So the terminology, like in the most recent edit, actually, I was avoiding using the terminology too much because the label doesn't really matter. But I was saying things like inside of, the perspective inside of such and such, or zoomed out or wider perspective. If I've worked with people longer, I'll use terms like third person limited, omniscient. If I know that we're speaking the same language, I'm not going to throw a term like that into the comments if I don't think that the writer, so it kind of builds up from there.
And something that I have found massively useful for kind of leveling up as a writer is manuscript evaluations, which I've done more of, I think, in the last year than I have in my 7 years of editing. So what this is, it's a lot cheaper, which I
Mm,
think makes it in this day and age an attractive option.
hmm
And we will, or the way that I do it is I will go through and read, and rather than making track changes on the document, I will refer to another document with kind of like a numbered reference, so like writing style one, narrative two, and so forth. Um, And what this enables you to do is to really assess things like writing tics, like persistent problems, like any spelling, punctuation, grammar issues that are kind of constantly cropping up that you can see are an issue for the author, and just explain through how this actually works. So I know that a lot of the clients who I've done this for have used this as a kind of methodology to do a kind of cheap developmental edit themselves
Yeah.
before then coming back for a copy or a line edit to just get the details really worked out, because it does provide that technical information about writing, but it also gives you really big picture things about this character isn't quite developing right. This chapter is paced really slowly, and I don't really understand why it's there. So you kind of get the wide gamut of a full evaluation of your manuscript.
I wonder, just to veer into the brave territory of AI again, Vicky, because I feel the same, or have noticed the same, that I'm being asked to do a lot more manuscript assessments, and I
Yeah.
love them. And I'm wondering whether it's because that's where people do want human feedback. So a manuscript assessment, or critique, if we're using terminology here, I don't know, a manuscript assessment, critique, or evaluation, there's a fourth one I can't remember. It's basically the same. Can't remember. Um, Different editors call it different things. And as Vicky was saying, it's not inline edits. There's nothing changed in your manuscript. You'll get a report that comes with a report will be sent to you. Now mine will have a section on characterization. It has a section on sort of structure. It has one on marketability. It has one on
Yeah.
writing craft. A few different things, and it's an overview. And I'm wondering whether, because and I know this because my husband's a writer, so when I've trialed this technology with his permission, I was like, well, what is Pro Writing Aid doing these days? Because they claim that they can critique, blah blah blah.
Mm.
Tell you what's the polite term for it? Because at the minute I'm thinking blowing smoke up ones. You know,
It's
it's
not quite
it's
there yet.
it's not quite there yet. It's
We're not
overly
obsolete yet.
no, it's it's overly complimentary,
Right.
actually. It's overly complimentary, and then the things that they say as areas for development are so generic,
Vague.
vague and
Yeah.
generic. So I'm wondering whether a few writers have tried the Pro Writing Aid manuscript assessment
Mm.
thing or whatever versions of it and just thought, well, that's not worth the paper it's written on. I want to actually know what a real person, real editorial professional reacts to this. And as you said, it's a cheaper option too, so
Yeah.
it's nice. It's a nice just get a feel of where you are with your work. It's
And I
quite a
think,
nice thing to do at an early-ish stage.
yeah, I think
Yeah,
that brings us really nicely into talking about the different kinds of edits, because we mentioned at the beginning that you and I are actually quite different kinds of
yeah,
editors.
yeah,
I think you will offer developmental, but you specialize in kind of copy line edit detail. Well,
yeah.
I will copy edit, but I specialize in the kind of the earlier stage of the manuscript, the developmental. So what do these terms actually mean? So I'll cover
You do
developmental.
developmental, yeah.
So I would expect to see a manuscript quite a bit earlier than Claire. I come in usually at the point where a writer feels that they have done as much as they can for their manuscript and they are ready for some help. Um, and they are maybe as unconfident about the shape of the story as they are about their technical writing skills. So, developmental literally means helping you to develop your story. So, when I'm reading, I am looking at what are your writing tics, what words are you overusing, where are your technical issues. But I'm also looking a lot at your pacing, your characterization, your world building, your story arcs, all of these kind of big picture things. Well, sometimes big picture, sometimes it can come down to quite small details of like this scene isn't really working, or this bit of dialogue doesn't feel in keeping for your characterization for this character. Could you maybe explain where they're coming from here? And I help out mostly with that aspect of things. And quite often I will have an author come to me for that, and then we'll come back for copy editing. But sometimes they go on to someone else for copy editing or for proofreading, or if they're very technical, they might say, okay, that's me good. I'll go straight to proofreading.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm very big picture. Claire,
Yeah.
what does your day look like?
So what I'm not doing, you see, this is the distinction between developmental and line and copy editing. What I'm not doing is I would never say as part of my edit, let's start this chapter here instead. You know, these one, two, three paragraphs of this chapter. Let's just slash slash slash. That's gone. You won't see that as part of mine. So the are you like, no,
But this is
in a
the other
nice
thing. I don't
way, in a
really
nice
understand why
way.
it's here. It will be a lot stronger if it starts here.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
slashing. That's kind of how I'm
No,
phrasing
you're
it.
not butchering. No, because
No.
we've said this, we're not butchering. But you wouldn't get that as part of a line of copy edit. So once it comes to me, it's a given. It's kind of established that right. The point of view that this story is told from is the writer's decided it's set. It's the story, the order it's told in. It's all set. All of those kind of big picture things, the timeline, all of that. It's all done. So once it comes to me, it's about um, making the sentences the best they can be with what we've got there. I'm not saying I never delete any sentences. I do, especially ones that might be like redundant and things that have maybe already been said. But it's far more on a sentence level. So sometimes a sentence that started with 19 words ends up having 11. You know, it's that kind of thing because um, I've got a thing about sentences being chewy. Like, let's not. Should we just make this reading experience a bit more fluid, a bit more flowing? So let's get rid of the gristle. Nice sound effect there. I'm sure you enjoyed that. Um, so line editing for me is about smoothing out and making that reading, really putting myself in the position of reader and making that a pleasant experience. Um, it's also, so I call mine these days, I call it line slash copy editing because copy editing, you're looking at things like consistency, you're looking at, I do a lot of fantasy. So you're looking at, for example, I don't know why I keep thinking commander, but the commander in this, is this commander always capitalized? Is the commander lowercase? Is it priest? Is it governor? Is it, what is it? What are they doing in this world? Um, I'm looking at character names. It's funny. It's honestly surprising how often sometimes writers will forget what they called their character. And it'll suddenly
I
be
do that
like,
when I
oh
write.
dear. It's like,
Yeah.
who's that? It's like,
It's
oh,
because you
we
get so
just
into it. You're like, I
yeah.
can't be bothered. I'm in the flow. I can't be bothered to look back at what I called them last time. So they're just called Billy now.
Yeah, so I've got a style sheet. I've got all the characters written down. I'm looking at their eye color, hair color, what their build is. But it's also things like if a story takes place over a time, you're thinking about their stubble sometimes. You're thinking about their hair length, and you're thinking about like, is that still the same? Is it not? You know, is it consistent as it goes through? You look at the seasons. You're looking at geography. Like if you come out of this street, turn left and go over the bridge, is that what you said last time? So there's a lot going on at line and copy editing level,
Mm.
and you are dealing with um, punctuation and all the accuracy stuff as well. But you're looking at character and geography, and you are looking at timeline to make sure everything makes sense and there are no sort of logical gaps. And anything that doesn't make sense or it feels like there's something missing, then you would raise a query with the author to kind of go, well, what's gone on here? Let's have a workout of what's going on. So that's line and copy editing. And then proofreading I occasionally do, as I said, very infrequently now. But if I do it, it's on a PDF document to look at spacing, look at the layout, look at just make sure obviously that the grammar and everything's right. But I wouldn't be turning a sentence from 19 words into 11 on a proofread, but I would on an edit. That's a big
Yeah.
difference. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm
Time's
coming to
going on,
our,
Vicky.
I was about to say, I'm coming to our last question that
Yeah,
we
yeah,
had on
yeah,
our agenda. So if
yeah.
anyone has any questions, pop them in the chat now and we'll come to them in just precisely 2 minutes.
Oh wow, you're a good timekeeper.
So the last question that I was going to cover is what happens after an edit?
All
Do we,
right, well
do
that's
we do we pack up our inbox and leave?
well. Sort of. Right, I'm very clear with mine that mine is a one and done. So once I do an edit, and it's not the same for every
Yeah.
editor. Once I've done an edit and sent it on its way, that's it. It's not like hands up, but it's Right. I've sent it to, and I make sure that my comments are in such a way that the writer can deal with that themselves, should they need
Hmm.
to, you know. So I'm as clear as I can be. I'll often say, if there's a bit of an iffy sentence, I will offer, in the margin, I will offer a fresh sentence. So you could use this. So it means that they can put that sentence in, and it means that they know that that sentence is right. So I'm obviously aware that I've not offered I'm going to check your changes. So
Hmm.
try and do it in such a thorough way that there's not really a lot of that to do. But technically, people should still be having a proofread at the end of it if they have left a bit of budget or have somebody trusted that can do that. So yeah, there's not much back and forth once the edit is returned in the Cherry Edits world. Different editors do different things in that respect.
Yeah, I find it often depends on the author. So some authors like to have kind of an hour debrief where they can
Hmm.
just chat to me afterwards, or they might have some questions that they put together in an email, particularly because I'm doing these developmental edits where I might have said, oh, um, that this characterization towards the end is a little bit iffy. They might come back and say, oh, can you suggest I'm thinking of changing it to this. Does that work better? And that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, Again, because I am working a little bit earlier in the process than Claire, when I return a manuscript, I will often say, okay, once you sorted this, I think you're good to go to your proofreader or to go to typesetting or whatever your next step after editing is going to be. There will be some authors where sometimes the technical writing isn't great, but I've asked them to make a lot of developmental changes. So I know that if they are rewriting whole chapters, they are probably going to want someone to check back over that. So in that instance, I will do two things. I will either suggest that they ask me or their friend who is really good at like technical writing skills and proofreading or copy editing and that kind of thing, or another copy editor go back over it. Or if it is that thing where it's like, everything's great, chapter 11 is dodgy as shit, I will say to them, feel free to send chapter 11 back to me and I will
Yeah.
just edit chapter 11 because I've already got the context of what's happening there. So going to someone else is just going to be really confusing.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that developmental, there has to be some
yeah,
back and forth.
yeah.
Definitely. It's a different
And
type of service.
And like I said, you're always going to be my author. So I love to hear when your book is published. I
Yeah.
will put it on my newsletter, on my social media. I will cheerlead for you. I will push as many readers your way as possible. Yeah, and I just love to hear about books out in the world. I've got my little shelf of pride behind me with
Oh.
my signed copies.
It's because a lot of my, because as I said in the intro, a lot of my writers come my way via social media. That's, you know, we're keeping in
Yeah.
contact that way afterwards. So I'm seeing when the book comes out, and I'm you know, dropping them a like when I see that they've I don't know, got their book launch or whatever, you know, those kinds of things. So we're still in each other's world a lot of the time.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's something that hasn't got old for me. Like when something that I've edited goes out into the world, I still get that like,
Yeah.
I have a little piece of that book is mine.
Ah, I'm going to, Vicky, with your permission, stop the recording and then we can invite people to ask their questions.
Okay,
So
thank
thank
you,
you,
recorded
people.
people.
Yeah, I was going to say, people who've watching this recording, thank you. Hope that was useful. So we will now pause or stop the recording.